So we have 18 topics, actually 19 topics, but JavaScript best practices is something that we are not going to cover in this session. In the future we will actually add it. So we have 18 topics. So the first 3 topics are JavaScript, and then we'll talk about JavaScript frameworks and toolkits. This is just an overview of popular JavaScript libraries. And then we'll look into Ajax Basics. Here we're going to take a look at XML HTTP request object, which is pretty low level Ajax JavaScript object. And then we are going to take a look JSON as a data representation format. And then we'll take a look at prototype library. And then we'll spend maybe 6 sessions on Dojo. Okay. And then we're going to spend 2 sessions on jQuery. In the future, we're going to actually de-emphasize Dojo, but we'll actually put more emphasis on jQuery because jQuery seems to be more popular than any other JavaScript library. Okay. And then we are going to take a look at DWR, Direct Web Remoting, and then CSS, and last topic is comment. Okay. Alright, so let's get to the presentation. For those of you who have an access to JPassion.com, you have to be in fact a paying member in order to access the hands-on lab. I recommend you to download the hands-on lab and actually try the exercises together with me. Any demos I'm going to actually show today is something that you can actually do yourself. Okay, so that is something I would recommend. Alright, so let's move on. So these are the topics that we are going to cover in this presentation. So we're going to start with the basics. What is and why JavaScript? And then how and where do you place JavaScript code? And then JavaScript language. We'll take a look at some language feature of JavaScript. And the meat of this presentation is JavaScript functions. Function is a very important piece of the technology in JavaScript. So we'll take a look at functions. In fact, we'll take a look at functions in advanced presentation, JavaScript advanced presentation. So this is the meat, JavaScript functions, and we'll see how you can define functions and how you can invoke functions and also function as a method. And another meat of this presentation is JavaScript object. So we will see how you can create a JavaScript object. In fact, you can create JavaScript object in 3 different ways. So we're going to look into each of those methods for creating JavaScript object. Okay, what is and why JavaScript? So JavaScript is a scripting language, and in general, scripting language is considered as a lightweight programming language. And in JavaScript is mainly used to add interactivity to your HTML pages. And you can use JavaScript in different contexts, but the most popular way of usage of using JavaScript at the moment is actually putting some interactivity, dynamic behavior in your HTML page. So you can actually embed JavaScript code in your HTML page, or it could be in a separate file. So these are the things that you can do with the JavaScript. So again, JavaScript is basically a programming tool for HTML page writers for putting some dynamic behavior in that HTML page. So you can put dynamic text into HTML page. You can react to events. For example, mouse click event will trigger some JavaScript functions to be executed. You can read and write HTML elements. You can validate some input data, and you can detect even what kind of browser is actually being used. And you can also place some animation into these HTML elements. Okay, moving forward, how and where do you place JavaScript code? Okay, so I think there are a couple of questions here. Where can I find the PDF? Yeah, so the PDF file and the contents, you have to be a paying member, so I just want to be clear on this. So attending this webinar is free, but actual contents including PDF file and hands-on lab, and actually recording is actually for paying members. Okay, so just to make sure that you understand that. Alright, so in order to actually access the PDF file and hands-on lab, you have to be a paying member, and then you can just log in and access the contents. Okay, so let's move on. How and where do you place JavaScript code? So you are going to use a script tag with type attribute. Type attribute is optional, and so you can actually place your JavaScript code either in the header part or body part. Okay, so like this. And if you have your JavaScript file in a separate file, then you can reference it by using src, source attribute. So here I have my own javascript.js file in this URL, and then I'm accessing it. Okay, and you can actually provide relative path. Okay. Okay, so a simple JavaScript.html file is actually very simple. So I'm going to actually go to, so what you're going to do is every project in JPassion.com are in the form of either Maven project or NetBeans project. Here the projects are provided as a NetBeans project. Here these are all HTML files, so you don't have to have it as in fact the NetBeans or Eclipse or Maven project. All you have to do is in fact go to this location and use your browser to open it. But here I'm actually using Eclipse because I want to actually have some formatting as well as the code, the coloring like this, and you can also have some code completion. So usage of IDEs in general is actually a good idea. So here is actually very simple exercise. Here I'm actually let's see, here you go. So this is simple JavaScript HTML file. Okay, so basically it's just displaying this text, and then it just display alert message. Then I define a function, and then I have a button here. Okay, so let me just run this code. So I'm gonna just open it and then choose a browser. And it display alert message, and then it display these things as well. And if I click it, then it will display, it will invoke a function. Okay, so very simple code. Now I can actually have the same functionality in JavaScript code in a separate external file. So if I click this guy, you can see I'm actually referencing JavaScript file called my own JavaScript.js file under this directory. So I have my own directory here. If you take a look at this JavaScript file, it contains pretty much the same code that I have shown you, and it should work exactly the same. Okay, so again, if I open with a browser, and it will work exactly the same. Alright, so pretty straightforward. Let's move on to variables of JavaScript language. So you can create a variable with or without var statement. Okay, so this is the way that you can create a variable, then assign some value. So I'm assigning some value to str name variable and also str name variable here. Variable names are case sensitive, so yes and capital Y, yes, are two different variables. So JavaScript is case sensitive. Variable names must start with a letter or $sign or underscore character. So these are all valid variable names. Now if you declare a variable without assigning any value, then the type is undefined. Okay, so there is in fact very odd type called the undefined. So in this case, when I try to display the value of this, it will say undefined. JavaScript variable scope. By the way, I'm going to actually answer questions at the end so that I can actually finish the presentation and the demos, because I have a lot of contents. Okay, so I'm going to actually finish them up all, and then we'll try to answer the questions. If we don't have enough time to answer your questions, please post the questions to class areas. Okay, so that is an email alias that you can post a question. You don't have to be a paying member to post the questions and to the class alias, and then I will be able to see those questions later on and answer those. Okay, so JavaScript variable scope. So there are two different scopes: global variable scopes and global scope variables, and the local scope variables. So if you declare a variable outside a function, that is a variable in the global scope. Okay, so what that means is that all functions on that global scope, meaning on the same page, can access any of these global variables. And the lifetime of these variables start when they are declared and when ends when the page is closed. Now, local scope variables are the variables defined inside a function. Okay, we'll take a look at these things in a bit more detail moving forward in the rest of the presentation. Okay, so let's try variables. So here we have defined the global and local variables. So let's take a look at the code. So let me show the code here first. Okay, so this is a global variable, and this is also a global variable because they are not defined inside a function, and this is also a global variable. By the way, whenever you're using console.log, you should be able to see the value in JavaScript console. Okay, so I'm going to show that in a few minutes. Now I'm defining a function called the display names. Now here I'm defining two variables. One is her name and the other one is somebody's name. Okay, so this is actually defined in local scope. Okay, now the local scope variable has to start with a var. If you define a variable, even if it is inside a function without the var, it is actually defined in the global scope. Okay, all right. So now so this is the function. Now we are going to call this function. So it's going to access his name, her name, and somebody's name, and you should be able to access all those. Okay, his name, her name is local variable, local scope variable. Obviously, I mean this is all should be able to be accessible within display names. And now if I call the somebody name, okay, so this one, if you try to access to her name here, it will actually return uncaught reference error, meaning it cannot access it because her name is a local variable. However, you can access somebody's name because it's actually defined in a global scope because it doesn't have a var. Okay, so let's run this this code. So I'm going to open with again browser, and I'm going to press F12 to display the JavaScript console. So you can see I can actually access all this. Now if I change code, so here let me actually try to access her name. So again, her name is local scope variable. It's only accessible inside this function. So if I try to access it, so let me try to save it. Now if I try to access it, then I'm having this uncaught reference error. Whole name is not defined. Okay, meaning you cannot access this local scope variable in here. Okay, all right. Okay, the next is undefined. So this is an undefined exercise. So this is the variable that is assigned with value 3, and this is the variable that has not been assigned with anything. So at this point, this is undefined. So here, the exercise is I'm actually checking whether var1 is undefined type or not, and here var2 is undefined or not. So we should see this message, okay, because var2 is undefined type. Okay, and if you actually inspect var2, you should actually see undefined as well. Okay, so let's run this. Open with the browser. So var2 is undefined, and I'm gonna press F12. And here you can see the var1 is assigned with value 3, and var2 is undefined. Okay, all right, moving forward. Control flow, just like other languages such as Java, JavaScript language has a control flow such as if and else, and switch. It does have loop, like a for loop, while loop, and do while loop. And it does have try, catch, and throw as well. Alright, so let's quickly do that exercise here. So the for loop. So this is an array, and it's basically going each item of the array and just display the index and the value. And this is a JavaScript object, and we'll actually see this structure later on of this JavaScript object. And you can also actually have this syntax, man, I, and I'm going to actually talk about this one in a few minutes as well. So again, it will just display these things, like a hands 2, legs 2, hands 1, or something like that. This is not actually good practice. You want to actually see whether that property is present or not by calling has own property or not, like this. Okay, otherwise you could actually have some errors. So here I'm actually checking whether there has been some property with that the index. So let's actually run this code. Pretty straightforward. So press F12. And you can see it's just displaying things. And if and else code, so it's basically checking whether time is the 10 o'clock or not. So right now it should be evening, so let's actually just run the code and press F12, and it displays good evening because it's 9 p.m. in Boston time. This is a throw. So here is basically if I place some value like a 13, it will actually say error, value is too high. And if you take a look at the code, now I will actually see the code. So it's basically using if a throw logic. So here, if x is greater than 10, I throw error 1. If it is less than 5, I throw error 2. And so it's basically using if and else, and actually using throw statement. And you can also see it does actually have a try and catch syntax as well. Okay, so that is actually this one as well. So basically, suppose if you call a method that is not valid, okay, I meant to say alert, but I actually mistype it. In that case, error will be generated, and the error will be actually displayed here. Okay, so again, if I run this code. This is the one. Okay, so this is the message that is displayed from here. Okay, moving forward. Yeah, these are pretty straightforward things. I'm actually moving a bit fast on this part because we have more important. Yeah, so these are important topic, defining functions. So what is a function? So function is not that much different from Java methods, at least in this respect. There are in fact some differences which you're going to take a look later on. Function is basically JavaScript procedure. It's actually set of statements that actually do some task. Okay, so a function can take 0 or more named parameters, just like a Java, and function body can contain as many statements you want, and you can also actually declare your own variables, just like a Java method. And return statement can be used to return a value at any time terminating a function. Again, not that much different from Java. If no return statement is used, and JavaScript returns undefined. Okay, all right. So these are not that much different from what you know as a Java method. Okay, so how are you going to define functions? By the way, when we say define, we also use the term declare. So function definition is the same thing as a function declaration. Okay, so you can define a function in 3 different ways: through function statement, through function expression, or you can use a function constructor. And this third scheme is actually rarely used. Okay, now I want you to remember a function definition is just that. It's not a function invocation. So basically what happens is that when you declare function, internally a function object is created, and that function object is assigned to a property of owning object. Okay, so I'm going to explain this one in a bit more detail using example in the following slide. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about here, that's fine. Alright, so let's take a look at the first example of creating a function. A function statement consists of a function keyword followed by name of the function. So this is an example. So this is a function keyword. This is your name of the function. Then you can have a list of arguments. Here I have only one argument. And then inside curly braces, you have whatever number of the statement that performs some tasks. Okay, so when you have this declaration, so this is a declaration or definition of a function. What happens is that internally, a function object gets created, then assigned to a property of owner object. So if you create this one outside of another function, it's actually being created in the global scope, meaning it is a property of global object, in this case window object. Okay, so you can actually see this one later on in a bit more detail. Alright, so that's the way that you can create a function using function declaration. The second way that you can create a function object or function is through function expression. So function expression is just like expression in Java. The function has to be assigned to a variable, or it can be passed as an argument. Okay, so this is an example where you are defining function expression here and then assigned to a variable. Now function expression does not have to have a name, so it is called anonymous name because the name is optional. So if you want to have a name like this, you can have, this is a PDF file. If you want to give a name, then you can give a name here, function X or something like that. So if in fact actually creating a recursive function like a factorial function, then you have to have a name, even though it's actually expression. But in general, if the expression does not have to have a name. Okay, so this is anonymous function, and it's assigning to a variable called my function 1. So again, what happens is that this is a function declaration. This is actually creating a function object, and it will actually assign the function object to a property of, again, owning object. So the property name in this case is going to be my function 1. In the case of function declaration, the name of the property is going to be the name of the function. Okay? Alright. You can also create a function through function constructor. So again, this is rarely used. So you are actually creating a function by actually using function constructor, and you can actually pass any number of string arguments, but the last string argument is in fact the body of the function. So here I'm actually creating a function, and then so this is in fact the same as this. Okay, so when I actually call my function 10 and 20, it will actually get executed with this, so it will return like a 30. Okay, all right. Okay, so let's do function definition exercise. Okay, all right. Okay, so here we're actually creating a function in 3 different ways. So this is a function declaration. So I'm declaring or defining a function called my named function. Okay, so again, what happens internally is that a function object gets created, and then it will be assigned the property of owning object. In this case, because this function is being declared in the global scope, the owning object is the global object, in this case window object. Okay. Alright, now this is the second scheme of creating a function. So here, this is a function expression, and again, I don't have any name here. Okay, I can give a name if I want to, like this. Okay, like let me just type X like this, and then it is a name of the function of X. Again, unless you're actually creating some kind of recursive function here where the inside this code it has to call its own function, you don't have to have a function name. So I can actually make it anonymous. Now in this case, again, function object gets created and will be assigned to a property of owning global object, meaning the window object, and the property name in that case is going to be my function 1. Okay, So we're going to actually inspect the owning object. So in this case, whenever you say this, that is actually referencing current object. In this case, the current object is a global object, which is window. So here, the window object should have a property of my named function and my function 1. Okay, and then I'm actually assigning my function object to my var. Okay, so later on, we're going to actually spend some more time in advanced JavaScript. Function in JavaScript is a first-class object. So you can actually assign it to a variable, you can pass it as an argument, you can return it as an object. Okay, so here I'm actually assigning function object to a variable called the my var. Okay, alright, so here now I'm actually creating function object using third scheme, using function constructor. Again, we'll talk about the concept of function constructor later on. So here, this is the body of the code. So now I'm actually calling each of these functions, my name function, my function 1, my var, and then I'm also calling my function 3, passing 3 and 5, and it should return 8. Okay, so let's run this code first. So press F12. So it will actually display life is good, hello and goodbye, and 8. Now we are going to inspect this global object of window object. Here you are going to see properties of my function 1 and my name function, my function 1, and my var, and my function 3. These are all properties of owning object, in this case this window object. So if you take a look at here, let's see, here you go. So you see my function 1, you can see it is assigned with a function object. My function 3 is again assigned with a function object. This is anonymous function, as you can see here. My name function is again, so when you declare your function, basically the name of the property is the name of the function. And also my var is also assigned a function object, so it is also a function object. Okay, alright, so hopefully that gives you a sense of how to declare or define a function. Alright, so this is actually the beginning part of the function. Function is a very, very important concept in JavaScript. And we're going to actually spend quite a bit of time understanding these function things. And this is actually the first part, how to define a function. Okay? Alright. Okay. Function as a method. If you define a function as a property of an object, it is called method. Okay? This is not actually, this is not like a standard or anything like that. It's just a convention. So here, I declare a function, and then I create a JavaScript object. Okay, so this is a JavaScript object. Okay, we're going to see how we can create this kind of JavaScript object. JavaScript object is basically a hash, meaning it is key value pairs. So this is the first name property, which has a value of John, last name property, which has a value of Doe, and age property has a value of 50. Now tell your age. It is a property, and in this case the actual value that is assigned to this property is a function object. Okay, so as I said before, function is a first class object, so it could be assigned to a variable. So here I'm actually assigning the anonymous function because I don't have a name to this function. Okay, you can have a name if you want to. And so this is the another anonymous function, meaning it doesn't have a name, but it has an argument. Okay, this one doesn't have an argument; it does have a single argument. And here you can also assign a name function. So here I declare a function called my function defined somewhere, and then I'm assigning the function object to this property. Okay, so again, whenever you have this function, so we have 3 examples of functions, to a property of an object. In that case, these are sometimes called a method. Okay, all right. Question from Lamikant. What is the difference between defining a function through number 1 and with a function constructor? Okay. Yeah, so we're gonna actually, I'm gonna actually move on because we're gonna actually talk about function in a bit more detail in advanced JavaScript. Okay, so for now, the most popular way of creating a function is declaring a function like this, and a function expression like this. Okay, so those are two most popular way of defining functions. Okay, now when you define or declare a function, it's basically creating a function object. It doesn't execute the function, however. That's very important. Okay, so let me repeat. When you're defining a function or declare a function, it just create a function object. Okay, it's just like creating a class in Java. Okay, nothing has been executed. So you have to invoke a function to execute the statement inside of the function body. Okay, so that is what we are going to talk about here. So this is what I just said. Defining a function does not execute it, meaning defining a function simply create a function object and assign it into a property of owning object, as we have seen in the demo. And calling a function actually performs a task. Okay? Also, function gets executed only when it is called, as we talked about here, or by an event. So, event will actually call that the function. So, in a sense, these are in fact pretty much the same thing. So, to keep the browser from executing a script as soon as a page is loaded, you can write your script as a function. Then it doesn't get executed until it gets called. Okay, so if you actually have this script code without inside a function, then it gets executed right away when the page is loaded. You may call a function from anywhere within a page or even from other pages if the function is embedded in an external JavaScript file. So that's kind of obvious. So this is a function invocation. So we declare a function here, meaning it just create a function object. Okay, and here we also create the function object and assign into a variable called the myFunction1. Okay, and then we assign this function object to another variable called the myFunction2. Now, these methods don't get executed until the method is being invoked. So here, I'm actually invoking my name function. So I'm actually invoking this function, passing an argument. Okay, so here, I'm actually passing life is good, then it will be executed, meaning it will just log that the string life is good into JavaScript console. And my function1 here, so this is the name of the variable that contains a function, points a function, and I can again invoke that function. And also here I'm actually invoking a function, my function2. Okay, so until you invoke a function, the logic inside that function body are not going to get executed. Okay, all right. Calling a function via event. So this is a case that when this is a button, so if you click it, then it will invoke that function. Okay, so in this case, function is invoked through an event. Alright, so let's actually do function calling via event. So here, function calling via event. So very simple code. So we have a myFunction1, myFunction2, and we have alert. So this is the case. If you have a JavaScript code without inside the function, then it will get executed right away as soon as page is loaded. So if I actually see this one with the browser, you're gonna see this alert message. And then I have a form here. And then when I click the form, the button, then it will call myFunction1, which says called with myFunction1. So let's run this code. So you're going to see this alert message right away, right? And then if I click this one, then we are going to see, I'm going to just F12, and you can see called within myFunction1. All right, relatively straightforward. All right, so JavaScript type. Okay. So there are primitive types and complex type, and just like Java, and so Boolean and numeric and string, those are primitive types, and complex type include array and object. Okay, now the reason the primitive types and complex type there is distinction is that primitive types are treated as a JavaScript as a value types. Okay, just like a Java, and so they will be passed them as values. Complex type is going to be passed around as reference, Okay. All right. So that is the only distinction. JavaScript is object-oriented programming language. So a type, even though string is a primitive type, string is a little bit kind of interesting. The type. It is a primitive type, but it has its own methods and properties. So you can actually call the length. You can actually access the length property of the string object, and you can call to uppercase method of the string object. Alright, so object types. So here let's actually see the types of object. JavaScript object. There you go. So I'm gonna just run this code first. So it actually shows you this is a string, and I'm gonna just show you type of. That is in fact what is called the type of. Type of is actually string value of a type. Okay, so here let's actually see. This is a string, right? And then you can actually call the constructor of it and see it's gonna So I'm gonna actually talk about the constructor later, so don't worry about this one. So type of returns a the string value of the type. So here it will just display, the string, and we also, this property value of the string and the method of the string, and this is the numeric number. Okay, so again, if you see type of this, this one it will say number. Okay, so let's please see that. So this is a number, string, array, boolean, function, date. Okay, all right. You are cutting off. Are you having some issues listening to me? Seeing the slide? Okay, yeah. Okay, so yeah, everybody seems to be seeing the slide perfectly fine. So let's move on. Okay, so this is important concept. JavaScript object is a hash or associative array. So everything in JavaScript is an object. Okay, let me repeat. Everything in JavaScript is an object. Now, every JavaScript object is in a form of a hash, meaning they are set of property name and values like this. Name, value, name, value, name, value, name, value. So every JavaScript object is a hash. Alright, so I want you to remember this. Every JavaScript object is a hash, meaning it's a set of properties and the value is assigned to their properties. Okay? Alright. Remember that. Alright, so the following two lines of code are semantically equivalent. So, you can access a property of a particular object using dot notation or the square notation. Okay, so these are in fact the same thing. However, this one has an advantage. So something you can have here can be a variable. So here, suppose I have a variable called x like a text, and then I can actually have this passion value to be assigned to this x property, but because x is a variable, basically I can actually access my person.text and it should actually display passion. Okay, so the square bracket has the extra feature of having the value could be a variable. Okay. Hey Thumb says audio is not clear. Can people hear me okay? Yeah, depending on, yeah, okay, so okay, so sounds fine. So looks like yeah, so I think if you do not have a high-speed internet connection, the audio might not be as good as other people. Okay, now as I said before, every JavaScript object is a hash. Okay, so in fact you can create your JavaScript object as hash literal. Again, we're going to talk about the different ways of creating JavaScript object. One popular way of creating JavaScript object is creating as a hash literal like this. So this is a JavaScript object, and then I'm assigning it to my person variable. So here, this is a set of properties and their values. Okay, now as you have seen before, this is a first name property that has a John as a value, and this is a last name property that has the Doe as a property, and age contains a 50. Now, a property, this is important, a property of an object can have a value of function object. Okay, so function object can be a value of a property of JavaScript object. Okay, so again, we have seen this example before, right? So here, value of a property can be a function. Okay, so this is anonymous function, and this is anonymous function with a single argument, and this is the function that has been declared somewhere. So here we created a function, with a name. Okay, so function declaration has to have a name. Okay, so in this case, that function is assigned to this property. Okay, so the value of a property can be a function. Okay, and then you can actually invoke those methods. So, as we talked about, a function object that is a property value of an object is called a method, right? So here you can actually call tell your age method, tell something method, and then tell whatever method. Okay? So this could be a little bit different from the way that the Java works. So it might be a little bit kind of awkward if you're coming from a Java background. But important aspect I want you to remember in this slide is a property of JavaScript object can be a function, and then you can invoke that function just like a method. Okay? All right. Remember that. Okay, the value can be another JavaScript object, of course. So I define my person object here, right? And then I can assign that my person object to person property of another JavaScript object. Okay? And then I can actually call, so I'm actually calling my var, and then person is a property, right? And then I can call a method of that person object. Okay? All right. Okay, so if you compare JavaScript object versus a Java object, similarity is that both has properties and methods. The differences are JavaScript object can be dynamically typed when Java object is not. So Java object is statically typed, meaning at the compile time you have to specify the type. In the case of JavaScript object, the type can be changed. Okay. Now, in JavaScript, properties and methods can be added dynamically to a JavaScript during runtime. So this is in fact a huge difference. Properties and methods can be added during runtime to a JavaScript object. Okay? So in Java, you cannot do that, right? You have to actually determine the structure of, meaning set of methods and set of, let's say, the properties at the compile time. However, in JavaScript, you can add properties. And those properties, again, could be, some values, or it could be function object. Okay? All right, so object add properties at runtime. So let's actually try that. Yeah, so this is the code. So we declare empty object. So here, we are actually creating empty JavaScript object. And then we are adding a method to this my object, JavaScript object, and basically I'm actually creating a function object and assign to a newly added property of this my object. Okay, then I'm actually adding another property called my age, and here I'm assigning value 20, and then I can actually invoke my newly added method here, and here my newly added method will actually display the name, and then it will display the my age. Okay. All right. So so let's actually run this code. And it will say, "Hello, Sang Shin, your age is 20." Okay. All right. So here the key point is that I'm actually adding new property called my newly added method and my age. And here basically the value of this property happens to be a function object, and here the value happens to be 20. Okay. Alright, so let's move on. Okay, so this is again very important part of this presentation. There are 3 different ways of creating JavaScript object, and we have already seen one. In fact, the most important way of creating JavaScript object, meaning creating a JavaScript object in a form of hash literal. So, three different ways. You can create JavaScript object as a hash literal. You already have seen this. And this is in fact the preferred way of creating JavaScript object. You can create a function constructor. So you create a function as a constructor first, and then you create an instance of a JavaScript object from it. Or you can create a JavaScript object from object. Actually, should it be object? Okay, there is no concept of class in JavaScript. Alright, so let's actually move on. So the first option, you are creating JavaScript object as a hash literal. So again, you have seen this example, right? I'm creating JavaScript object as hash literal. Again, remember, JavaScript object is a hash, meaning it is a set of properties and their values. And the value could be a function object. Okay, so here we have how many properties? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And this property happens to have a function object as a value, and same thing with this. Okay, so this is an example of creating JavaScript object as a hash literal, because JavaScript object is a hash. Okay, and then again you can call this method. Alright, we have seen this one already. So again, let's take a look at this code. Creating object that has hash literal. So we create a person object. This is the JavaScript hash literal. And then we add another method, another property called hobby. And then we are inspecting the person object. And then we actually call the method. Okay. By the way, you can actually, this is the case, I'm actually declaring this function later on than this, okay? But I can actually use that one to set this object, okay? Alright, so let's actually try to run this code and let's actually dissect this person object, okay? So this is a person object we just created, okay? Let's open with browser. So as expected, these are being displayed. Now let's dissect or analyze that my person object. So you can see it has a name, age, first name, hobby, and last name, and it has other properties called the method 1, tell something, tell your age. Okay, so these are all properties. Okay, and these three properties happen to have their values as a function object. Function objects are the values of these properties. Okay, all right. So that is the first scheme of creating JavaScript object. Second popular way of creating JavaScript object is from what is called the function constructor. So in this case, function is actually playing the role of a template. So here I'm actually creating a person function, the object. Okay, so function is declared. Okay, so it does have, in this case, the first name property, last name property, age property, and tell your age property. Okay, and this property happens to have a function object as a value of this property. Okay, so this is a template or constructor. We call it in fact function constructor. And from the function constructor, you can create a new object by using new keyword, new person, and this, new person, this. So this is in a sense pretty much the same in Java. Right? In Java, you're actually creating a class, okay? And then from the class, you create an object using new, right? In JavaScript, you are actually creating a function. And in this case, function is playing the role of a template, meaning a constructor, okay? So here I created two person object and assigned to my father and my mother variable. And then I can now add new properties to that object. So here I'm actually adding new field to my father object with this value, and I'm also adding another function to I'm adding another property called the my function, and the value happens to be a function object. Okay, all right. So this is a case that we are creating an object as a from a function constructor. So let's actually do that. Okay, so create object via constructor. So here we created a person function constructor. So just regular function. Okay. By the way, if you're using this function as a constructor, convention is that you want to actually use the first. You want to actually have the first letter of the function as a capital letter. Okay. Now here I actually create a function constructor, and now I can actually, at this point, this person is a function object. Okay, so remember, whenever you declare a function like this, a function object gets created, and then it will be assigned to a property of owning JavaScript object. In this case, the owning JavaScript object happened to be global object, which happened to be a window object, and this is actually referencing the global object. So if you actually say this.person, then it will actually show the person function object. Okay, and then here I'm actually creating new person object using new. Okay, so my father is now actually new. My father is a variable that is pointing to a person object. Okay, and now I can actually inspect the my father object, and then I can actually display the first name value and age value of my father JavaScript object. And then I'm actually adding a method to my father object, again dating runtime. So I'm adding method 1 property, and the value of that property happened to be a function object, in this case my method, okay, which is defined here. Okay, and then I can invoke my method. Okay, so let's actually run this code. Okay, so you can see this is the first, this is the first inspection. So here I'm actually inspecting function object or person. So you can see this is, function object. Now the second, inspection is my father JavaScript object. You can see my father JavaScript object is a person object, right? So, you can see this is a person object. And this person object contains age property, eye color property, first name property, and things like that with the values of 50. And that's what I actually said here. John Doe 50 and blue. Okay, and it also has a method property. Okay, and this property contains a value as a function object. Okay, all right. By the way, in JavaScript advanced session, we'll talk about the concept of this proto. Okay, so for now, don't worry about this. Alright, so that is how you can create JavaScript object from a function constructor. And we also actually dissect, how these things in fact done internally, again in JavaScript advanced session later on. Okay, the third option is you can create JavaScript object directly from object. Yeah, I should actually say object. Okay, because there is no concept of class. Everything is an object in JavaScript. So here I'm actually creating new object from object. Like remember I can create from a function object, right? Okay, so here I'm actually creating an object because function object is in fact a child. I mean, it's in a sense inherited from the object. Okay, through prototype. Again, we'll talk about the concept of prototype in JavaScript advanced session later on. So here I'm actually creating person object from object. Okay, and then again I'm adding brand new method. Brand new property called the first name and age, and of course I can add brand new okay, here I'm actually adding another property called the tell you age, and the value happens to be a function object. Okay, and I can call the function. And so you can actually add a predefined function as well. Okay, so this is a function declaration. Then I'm actually adding that function to a brand new property of this person object. Okay, now these two are completely different things. Okay, so this is tell you age, this is a function, right? So here you are assigning function object to tell your age property, right? That's what you have seen so far. Now if you call tell your age, so if you have a parenthesis, that means you're calling this function. So the result of calling this one, in this case, is not returning anything. It's going to actually return undefined. So in this case, you are assigning undefined to this property. Okay, so I want you to remember the difference between these two. So here you are assigning a function object to this property, and then you can invoke it. Here you are actually assigning the returning value of this after invocation of this method to this property, which happen to be in this case null, meaning undefined. I'm sorry. Alright, so this is a case that I'm creating an object from an object. So let's actually see. Create an object from object. Okay. So here I create a person object from object, and then I'm basically adding new properties: first name, last name, age, and color. Okay, and then I'm actually adding a new method. Okay, so actually, new property whose value happen to be function. Okay, and again, I can inspect the object. They should have all these properties, and then I'm actually calling method 1. By the way, in JavaScript, you can have a variable number of arguments. So here, method 1 is taking 2, right? The arguments, right? So here, it's not actually sending anything. So when you display thing, it will say undefined and undefined. Here it will say apple and undefined. Here it will say apple and orange. And here you're actually sending first name and last name, right? Okay, so let's actually run this code. So you can see undefined, undefined, apple and undefined, apple and orange, and John and Doe. Okay, and now if you actually see this, if you inspect the object, again, we are actually inspecting my person object. Okay, so my person object should have all these properties: first name, last name, age, and color. Again, remember, every JavaScript object is a hash, meaning it is basically set of properties and their values. Okay, so these are all properties: age, eye color, first name, last name, and method 1. And this method 1, the value happen to be function object. Okay, all right. Global object. So I mentioned the concept of global object. Okay, so in browsers, the window object is a global object, and anything that you declare in the global scope, they are properties of global object. Okay, and this is basically refers to an object. The function is a method of, meaning the function is a property of that object. So in global scope, so here I'm defining global scope variable. So meaning this is a property of global object, in this case window object. Again, this is my global function declaration. It is a function. It is a property of global object. Okay, and you can actually dissect. We already have done this one. Okay, so let's actually try one more time. So global object. Where is the global object? So here. So I said everything is an object in JavaScript, right? And in JavaScript, the JavaScript object is basically set of properties and their values. So these guys are in fact properties of an object, in this case global object. Okay, so as you have seen, the global object, in this case a Windows object in the browser. Okay, so when I actually say this, I'm going to actually inspect this, which is the global object, then I should see properties of my global variable and my global function as two added basically properties of Windows object. So let's actually run this guy. Okay, 12. Okay, so we have seen this one. So it does have window object has a lot of properties, right? Okay, but it should have two properties that I have added. Yeah, here you go. My global function and my global variable. Okay. Alright, so I'm done with the presentation, but let me actually show the hands-on lab. Basically, hands-on lab is exactly what I showed to you, but it's actually documented. Okay, so each exercise is representing the topics in the slide. Okay, so if you go to function definition, basically that's exactly what I showed to you as a demo. Okay, and actually kind of emphasized the key aspect of each code, so you'll have a better understanding by looking at the hands-on lab documentation. Okay. All right, so it's already 10 o'clock, and again, I know there are a lot of questions. I'm going to just answer one question because it seems like several people asked this question. Where can I see the labs and the presentation? Okay, so as I said in the beginning of the presentation, you have to be a paying member of JPassion.com in order to access the course contents. Attending this webinar is free, but the way I'm making my living is that, if you see the value of this hands-on lab and the presentation and even recording, then you have to be a paying member. And then you actually go to JavaPassion.com, click courses, and so let me actually show you from the beginning. And you're gonna actually click JavaScript Dojo and jQuery Ajax Comet course. And if you log in with a paying, so I'm gonna just logging in. Then you should be able to get the slide. Oops, okay, so let me go to the course. Then you should be able to get the slide and hands-on lab. And yeah, by the way, the homework. Let me actually talk about the homework. You're gonna actually send the homework and also recording. I'm gonna actually post this recording in maybe 30 minutes. So the homework, I want you to do homework. Yeah, homework is basically creating the 3 JavaScript objects using those 3 schemes. Those 3 schemes are, first, using hash literal, second, using function constructor, and third is creating a JavaScript object from object to object. Okay, so that is the homework. Okay, alright, so hopefully that is useful. Tomorrow we're going to actually talk about, let's see, what is the topic? So tomorrow we're going to talk about DOM APIs, and in the day after tomorrow we're going to actually talk about more advanced JavaScript. Here we're going to talk about closure, prototype, and things like that. Okay, all right. Again, for the questions that I do not have time for, I do not have time to answer, please post those questions to class area so that at least the questions are there so that I can answer those questions later on. Right? Thank you very much. See you tomorrow.